the electrical site, isn't it?
Yeah. That's a biggie.
As metaphors go, the complete closure of Heathrow, Europe's busiest airport, because of a fire in a suburban electricity substation is a timely one.
We will want to understand both the causes of this event and what lessons, if any, it can teach us.
Even with Britain's best man on the job, the shutdown metaphor can even be made to work with a little imagination as a parable for Europe's wider existential retreat.
If the government ends farming, which is seemingly what it wants to do, where do we get our food from?
Decades of environmental extremism that has battered its competitiveness.
Our fossil fuel addiction is a Frankenstein monster, sparing nothing and no one.
A multicultural relativism that sapped its social cohesion.
Multiculturalism makes no demands of the incomer to integrate.
And official delusions about a borderless utopia that have rendered it defenceless against threats, foreign and domestic.
It has failed because it allowed people to come to our society and live parallel lives in it. They could be in the society, but not of the society. And in extreme cases, they could pursue lives aimed at undermining the stability and threatening the security of our society.
Like Heathrow that mid-March day, Europe is a civilization gone dark, its people grounded, the rest of the world turning around mid-flight and finding opportunity elsewhere.
How do you feel? How do you think I feel? Not great. Disgruntled. I was ready to go home.
Now, as tempting as metaphors are, I could just as easily draw comparisons elsewhere. Still, there's no doubt that Europe's existential crisis is real. And I recently accepted an invitation to offer my own thoughts to a committee of the House of Lords in London.
The geopolitical changes in the world that have occurred over the last 30 years inevitably are reflected in different attitudes that I think Americans by generation have towards the relationship with the UK.
My administration is acting with unprecedented speed to fix the disasters we've inherited from a totally inept group of people and to solve every single crisis facing our country.
President Trump's shock treatment to the sensitive parts of Europe's anatomy, his apparent embrace of Russia over Ukraine, and his administration's derisive words about the European Union and European members of NATO may not have been intended to revive Europe's will to live.
I'm also going to ask all NATO nations to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP.
But they certainly seem to have had that effect.
For those who are still dreaming that history had somehow magically ended when the Cold War ended, history is now back, and Europe is becoming a geopolitical player.
Convinced that the US is no longer a dependable ally, and that Russia is an ever more dependable adversary, Europe is finally, decades late, getting serious about developing the means for its own survival.
Estonia's defense spending is about to hit 5% of our GDP. Many European countries around us have declared the same goal.
Friedrich Merz, soon to be the German Chancellor, has already persuaded the frugal and pacific Bundestag to vote through a big increase in the country's debt limit and a splurge in infrastructure and defense spending. And then there's the question of nuclear deterrence.
Maybe there will be some difficult decisions to be made about the role of the independent nuclear deterrent, the so-called independent nuclear deterrent for the UK, about further defence collaboration with Europe, which is somehow outside NATO. I mean, because remember, we should never forget that one of the ways in which Americans have always liked to have it both ways is, they want Europeans to do more in their own defence, but not too much, thank you very much. I mean, that was one of the defining features of the NATO relationship for 50 years, which was, yes, of course you should do more burden sharing, but we want to be able to tell you what you should do. We don't like the idea of an independent European defence pillar, and I think that's going to become a more difficult issue for the UK to deal with.
So rebuilding European defence will require massive investment over a sustained period, both public and private. And this is why the Commission put forward a plan to unleash 800 billion euros of investment in European defence.
All this activity is having a bullish effect on the long-stagnant European economy and financial markets. Economists are revising growth prospects upward on the back of all that additional spending and debt.
This includes our new instrument, we call it SAFE, that can very quickly unlock 150 billion euros for member states.
There are risks for America, though, in all this. Europeans hardly need an excuse to indulge their protectionist instincts, and concerned that US defence equipment will now come with conditions attached, they surely will.
The age of spheres of influence and power competition is well and truly back.
There's another possibility, and it seems just as plausible, unfortunately. Europe's much vaunted transformation doesn't happen after all. Already, Italy and Spain have objected to the EU's plan for more aid to Ukraine. European nations far from the front lines of Russia don't see the threat in the same way that Germany or Poland do. Meanwhile, France has persuaded other EU countries to exclude British companies from competing for contracts in that €150 billion defence fund unless the UK gives Paris what it wants on, wait for this, fishing rights.
It's stupid, because at the end of the day, Europe has woken up in the last few weeks to the reality that Europeans are going to have to work together if they're serious about the continental defence. You're either serious about security or you're not. What the French are telling us with this move is that they're not serious about security, because everyone knows that if you want to have effective continental defence in Europe, you need the British on board.
So much for European unity. For all its bold talk, Europe could easily remain economically hidebound, politically divided and militarily weak, even as tensions with the US rise dramatically. Plus ça change.